One of the first characteristics taught by Buddha, we talk about the four seals of the view, the paradigm of Buddhism. The first is impermanence. Impermanence is not meant only that which is here today and tomorrow won't exist, but impermanence means mostly this continuous interaction and consequently this continuous transformation. Impermanence in itself is understood as a continuous transformation, continual transformation. The definition of impermanence in Tibetan is kilchi chikpa. Kilchik means instant. Kilchik means from instant to instant. Is a participle that shows an action. So the instant is actually doing the action, and jikpa is transformation. So from every instant, the instant brings transformation. So every instant is in constant transformation. Our body is constantly transforming. Our mind is in constant transformation. Our surroundings, the society, our society around us, every aspect of the world in our lives is in constant transformation. And even if this isn't the point I wanted to share with you today, but maybe just briefly, which is it's absurd, but sometimes we say things like, I hope it's going to be like this forever, or I could never live like this forever. Sometimes people come to me and say, I can't live like this forever. I say, don't worry, because it's not going to stay like this. It's going to get better or it's going to get worse, but it's not going to stay like this. If it gets worse, then enjoy it now while it lasts. And if it gets better, then don't worry so much about it. But the point is, like this, it's not going to remain. But one of the biggest causes of our suffering is our ignorance, because at the root of our suffering is ignorance. And one of the greatest forms of ignorance is the grasping at the permanence of what is actually impermanent. So it's not conceptual, but we perceive and we relate with that which is impermanent as if it were permanent. But I'm just going to close the parentheses because this isn't what I wanted to talk about today. This is just thoughts in between, just to remind us about this. The point is that everything is in constant transformation. But why do things transform? What generates this change, this transformation? The interaction. The stronger the interaction, the greater the interaction, the greater the change will be, the greater the transformation. And in our lives, we are in constant transformation because we are constantly interacting. We're interacting with body, mind, with our surroundings, with other people, the situations we experience. We interact continuously with the things we eat, and what we see, what we listen to, what we think. Every moment of our lives, we're interacting. And this interaction naturally brings a transformation. In this present moment, we are bringing with us the fruit of our past. Not just our past like the choices we made in these last days. But today we bring with us aspects of our being that are the results of choices and interactions that were taken by our ancestors, both on a social level but on a physical level, and even related to our environment. That's not what I wanted to talk about either today, but if we look at the Buddhist tradition, it talks about the 4 characteristics that we all have. Yinten in Tibetan, which means quality, but understood more like characteristic, they can be good or bad. And so we have these characteristics that are called Riki Yinten. So we're made up of Rik, means family. So these are the characteristics that come through our family lineage. Gyut means continuum. So this means, so what my parents and grandparents and ancestors did, this has a strong influence on many different aspects of myself that have been handed down from these, let's call it in the modern terms, genetic aspect. Much more than we can imagine. Different kinds of instincts, modern studies that show that there are certain fields that are transmitted from generation to generation. So the other day, when this master came to speak to us, the Japanese master Keiko, she shared that she wanted a child and she wanted a good seed, because the child is the fruit of the parents. So if you want a certain type of child, you need to have a certain type of seed. And it's like this. Today we forget this. That a strong part, an important part of familiar aspects, they show up often stronger from the grandparents than the actual parents. So there's a part of us that comes from this family lineage, let's say. There's another part, we kept Gyunten, and these are characteristics that we have that come from our past lives. These predispositions that we have. So if in one life, for example, I'm used to lying a lot, in my next life, I will be born with this tendency to lie. If I meditate a lot, I will be born with this tendency to meditate, this predisposition for meditation. Then we have characteristics called Chantoka Gyunten, which are characteristics of our being that is a fruit of what we have learned, the information that we receive through our lifetime, from our birth, the information that we receive in our social cultural context and that we're raised in. And then the fourth is known to Gyunten, and these are characteristics that come from our own experiences. So according to what I live and experience in my lifetime, this is going to influence my worldview and my being. These 4 characteristics can be summed up to our 5th characteristic, which is our body. Our body has an enormous influence on our experience, our life experience. So all these 5 aspects, so the genetic characteristics, the predispositions that we bring from life to life, and we continue to take them to our next life, and it's not at all like any kind of condemnation. There's a part of our knowledge and experiences and our body. These 5 characteristics are in constant transformation. here, the fundamental point that I wanted to share with you today is that we have a choice. We have a choice in our lives, which is to transform ourselves in a chosen way with awareness, or transform ourselves as it were just a consequence of the experiences that we live, as if we were just the consequence of the world around us. There's a term that I heard, the difference between training, so putting effort into something, and increasing an inertia. Because we're made of habits. We all are. When we find ourselves in front of a situation, what speaks louder is not what we know. I mean, that doesn't even count much, actually. When we find ourselves in front of a situation where we're going to react to, what counts more is our own experience, what we lived. That has greater weight. It's also for this reason that along the path that Buddha taught, he talks about the importance of perfecting our qualities. The parching in Tibetan, or paramita in Sanskrit. Often it's translated, not so precisely, they're translated as the six perfections, as if but these are characteristics that you should perfect. What do we mean by perfecting something? We mean it's something that doesn't come spontaneously, doesn't come naturally, but through a long process of training, at a certain point, it becomes absolutely natural and doesn't require any effort. One doesn't need to put energy into it. It comes spontaneously, naturally. This is when we have realized one of these qualities. Unfortunately, we've realized many things that are not useful. We don't use the term realization, but many of us have realized laziness perfectly. Anger, or realized envy, or dissatisfaction, or just like self-sabotage, sadness, etc. Many of us keep training in the wrong things. One thing is understanding that we should understand that every time I act in a certain way, I'm reinforcing that characteristic in my life, in my being. And it's not for nothing that all Buddha's teachings can be grouped into three parts called, in Pali, there's the Tripitaka, the three baskets. The three baskets are like it's a way to group Buddha's teachings. And with these three groups, it's not a conceptual division, but they're divided into three types of trainings. NgalSo in Tibetan, normally translated as the three higher trainings. The three higher trainings to help us, the three trainings to bring us to a higher state of being. It doesn't mean superior state of being, superior to the others. No, a state where one is free from one's own ignorance and as a consequence free from one's own suffering. Freedom, understood. Freedom means being well, not free from exterior conditions, but being free independently of the situation that one finds himself in. When we say, in Buddhist context, when we say we want to reach liberation, it's not going to heaven or creating an external condition. It's not a freedom that depends on external condition. It depends on ourselves. The Buddha said, I am my own protector. I am my own enemy. And that freedom is not something that depends on others. It's a freedom that when you reach it, doesn't matter where I am, it doesn't matter with whom I am, it doesn't matter the situation I find myself in, I'm able to maintain my own inner balance, satisfaction, and my peace, my sense of peace. This is what I mean. And to reach this state, there are these three trainings. Because the most important characteristic of being understood as the union of body and mind, is that we are malleable. The formal term is that we're interdependent. It means that if I act in one certain way, then I'm going to transform in one way. If I respond differently, then I'll transform differently. Once there was a master in the Gompa who came today, the master who came today to the Gompa, I saw that many people were very touched by the fact that she was full of vitality at 90 years old. But what we should understand is that I've seen this many times in our Western modern way. I don't know, it's just in Italy. But what we do actually is, we see the result. We praise the result, we venerate the result, and we forget that there was a whole process that brought to that result. When we see the result in others, we should venerate the causes, the process, the path that's behind that, because that's where we should put our energy. When I see an older person who physically is not well anymore, mentally is not well anymore, that's the result of a lifestyle, a physical, mental, emotional state of being that is unhealthy. Instead, when someone gets to old age and is mentally, emotionally, and physically well, joyous, this is the result of a healthy lifestyle. Lifestyle meaning that every aspect of life, the way he interacts with others, the way he thinks, the way he relates with his own emotions, the way he eats and sleeps and breathes, in every aspect of his life. And it's as I said, it's never too late, but it's never too soon either. So we should get started. And we should really remember clearly that everything we do, we are training in something. What do we want to train in? In laziness? In dissatisfaction? For example, I see, if we wanted to do a school of dissatisfaction, we would be great, because one of the best exercises to train in dissatisfaction is complaining. And here we have experts, but differently from other things. Teaching satisfaction, this ability to feel gratitude, requires more effort. Instead, criticizing, complaining, I think, it's worse than coronavirus. You're not going to be, there's no vaccine, you're not going to be saved with a mask. just be close to someone who criticizes or complains a lot. And, if one lets himself go, then soon after that person's criticizing too. I've seen this often. And it's not for nothing that in the 11th century, the vows that Atisha created, that he transmitted in Tibet, Atisha is in the red hat here to my right, and in the mind training vows that are commitments to take, they're very practical, very useful, and they work well today, but he gave this commitment in the 11th century in Tibet. It means that it was needed at that time too. One of the first says, don't talk about the missing qualities of others. That's a nice way to say, don't criticize others. This, the vow that comes after, making a modern translation would be mind your own business, which literally says, don't think about anything that has to do with other people, which doesn't mean don't think about other people, but it means, what color your underwear is, or what you do at your house. I mean, this is none of my business. If I can help you somehow, I'm here. If you need my help, that is important to me. As an example, what can I do for you? That's important. But what your personal choices are, what you do in your life, these are your personal aspects. I don't need to take up my inner space with these details of your personal life. But even centuries and centuries past, it was something that people liked to do. Today, people watch TV or films because, often a film, you're looking at the life of someone else. So, being so all of Buddhist teachings can be categorized into three groups, as we said before: Lama, Sutra Lama, the higher training of morality, Sutra, the higher training of concentration, and the higher training of wisdom. So, training in morality, in just a few words. Morality is not about rules that one needs to follow. Morality is understood our own ability to do what we know is right, what is good for us, and avoid what we know is bad for us. Just a simple principle. Let's start there. If each one of us, you can even do this exercise. You make a list in a notebook somewhere. Maybe in two separate columns. On one column, you write down what is good for you, physically, mentally, and verbally. Physically, what aspects in my life are good for me? My way of sleeping, my way of eating, the way I sit, the way of breathing and moving, the way of interacting with the world around me. All the aspects of the body. And what are the aspects, what physical behaviors do we have that are bad for us? We write that in another column, and then we move on to the verbal ones. Ways of using my speech that are harmful to me, and what are the ways of using my speech that are positive or beneficial to me? So we put in both columns what's harmful and what's beneficial, and then our mental attitudes, emotional aspects, conceptually. aspects that are harmful, and the mental, emotional aspects that are good for us. One is able to follow morality training out, then with effort, one is able to follow the list of beneficial aspects and avoid the harmful ones, even though it's not spontaneous, because if it's natural, then it's not a training, then one has realized it, of course. But since we're made of habits, life is a constant training, it's a constant transformation. I repeat, the question is, I want to transform myself as a consequence of the world around me, the situations I find myself, kind of like a leaf blowing in the wind. I do this because of that, I feel like this because that happened, etc. Or do I want to transform myself in a direction that I choose with awareness? Someone was telling me, but it's really tiring. Yes, but life is tiring, isn't it? When I thought about this the first time, I thought, is childhood easy or difficult? It's difficult. I remember, I had a beautiful childhood, but I remember, being a child. For example, as a child, I remember what bothered me the most was that people just treated me like I was stupid, as if I didn't understand things. And that was something that it's not easy to grow up, to learn how to relate with other people, generate our own identity, from childhood to adulthood. Adolescence, is it easy or difficult? And what do you think? It's difficult. There are also beautiful aspects, but it's difficult in becoming an adult. I get married, I don't get married, children, work, my career, there. It's difficult. Once one has made his own choices, just maintain those decisions is difficult too. I decided to marry that person. Is that all? Or do I need to cultivate that? It's not without effort. With work, one needs a certain kind of studies and needs to maintain one's knowledge. And being old, is it easy or difficult? It's difficult. It's difficult. And dying, I don't remember, but I don't think that it's the most as easiest of processes. It requires effort too, even if I think that death is a lot less heavy than what we transmit in our society, but that's another topic. The point, I have my own theory. I say my theory because it could be right or it could be wrong. What I've observed in my life and those around me, it's as if in every moment of our lives, we're living a cyclical reality. We have longer periods. In my life, I've got these cycles of 12 years. I saw every 12 years there was an important change. I've seen this in my own lifetime. There cycles of 7 years, of 5, or it just 1 year or 1 month. Or there's also cycles of 1 day or even just an hour. But our life is cyclical, and there are periods where until that cycle is finished, there's a certain amount of suffering that needs to be exhausted, to take away one condition, something else appears. It's if there's this process that needs to end for that amount of suffering to finish. But often, to try to resolve a negative situation, a suffering situation, we just one cycle finishes and then new cycles begin, and it comes never ending. What I mean to say is that in life, inevitably, there's we need to put effort. And we shouldn't be afraid of this. We should be afraid of going forward even without awareness, and worse if it's with awareness. So get into verbal, mental, verbal and physical inertia, where we just get used to things that are harmful to us, and we create this kind of comfort zone of our bad habits. I don't know if this is clear. So we live in this strange idea that to be happy, we need to work less and have more comfort. This law of minimum effort and maximum comfort. If it worked, then do it. But I don't see that it works. Once I remember we went to bed, and I went to my teacher who gave debate lessons. He was the abbot of the monastery. He was very busy with many things. And I would go very early in the morning. It was 8 in the morning, but 8 in the morning in Shigatse in central Tibet with would be basically about the 5:30, because all of China has the same time zone. So between Beijing and Tibet, instead of about 2.5 hours difference, but you follow the same time on the clock. So early I went to him, and it was snowing, and it was cold. Normally I don't suffer the cold, but maybe because we were over 4,000 meters high, Shigatse is about 4,000 meters high, maybe the body reacts differently. And it was quite humid, it was quite damp and cold. And I remember that night I was in bed with 3 covers and pashminas, and I was shaking. I mean, I just had everything I could on top of me. And there's no heating. So I went that morning, and I was living with that suffering of cold that morning. And they were very disciplined there in the monastery, so you can't cover your arms. You have to have your arms exposed. And as I was there waiting for the teachings, I realized that one of the monks who was their disciple, who lived with my master, he lived in a room. It was a kind of courtyard, a kind of hallway courtyard, and it was covered, that they closed it up with a wallboard, and that was his room. I mean, it was just wallboard, thin wallboard, wasn't even brick, and he lived there. And I saw him, and I said to him, "But aren't you cold here?" I mean, in the winter, when it was, the winter hadn't even started. It was December, but when in the depths of winter, aren't you cold here? And he looked at me as if to say, "I don't understand your question." And I simply answered, "I know it's cold." That's the end of story. And so what I realized is that very often we, in not accepting situations which, you often go into the kitchen where there's heat, and maybe even slept in the kitchen sometimes if necessary, but we have this idealized image inside that is this idealization of minimum effort and maximum comfort. And so this idea of having to suffer takes up a lot of mental space. But yeah, in the winter it's cold, but he's not wasting space in his mind with that. He's thinking about his studies and his meditations, etc. If it's cold, it's cold. Cover yourself. I remember once we were in Brazil, and we were doing a Thai retreat in Campus de Jordão on the mountains. And as we've done here too, Lama Michel always had us use the spaces of the temples even before we're finished. There was one winter I had to teach here, and you could see my breath. It was about 3 degrees here. It was so cold. The first couple of days, there were like 15 people. At a certain point, there was just like one person, and then there was no one. It was just one person came. It was so cold. And in Brazil, it was cold too at a certain point. In that time in Brazil, it was very cold. And you could see people were uncomfortable, and they started to complain because it was cold, and I stopped everything. I said, okay, here are 2 possibilities. Or we leave, or we stop complaining about it. We get some covers, do something to get warm. And then we did this exercise to generate inner heat, and there was a girl there, a young girl. She's not a young girl anymore. Anyway, she was big. She was about 9 years old. And it's a simple exercise, a breathing exercise. And when she started doing it, she started sweating, and she was showing, look, I'm sweating. But anyway, what I mean to say is, if there's a problem, if there's something that we don't like, or there's no solution, and you just go ahead, or you put the energy in the solution, because what happens is, just staying still, complaining, that takes up a tremendous amount of space, and space that keeps us from focusing on more important things. And I've seen that every once in a while, it seems that there's this idea, not so conceptual, that by complaining, the problem gets smaller. I don't know. Is it true or not? Why should you complain about something? About something that you don't like? Does it lessen the problem? Do you feel better when you complain? Maybe at the time you do, but what happens is it takes up a lot of inner space. Instead, we should try to fill up our inner space with what we want to familiarize ourselves with. So, a fundamental aspect of the way that Buddha taught is that life from dawn to dawn is a constant training. All the images that we see of the Buddhas and the Masters, what do they represent? They represent the state that we want to reach. The Dharma, what's Dharma? It's the path of training, going towards a direction that is not spontaneous, where the first part is morality, this ability to avoid what is harmful to us and cultivate what's good for us, physically, verbally, and mentally. Then there are the vows and different systems, but at the base is we should all make our own lists of what's good for us and what's bad for us. And, through our lifetime, these lists change. It's not fixed. We need to update them according to our own path. The second higher training is concentration. Because even if I know what I should cultivate and what I should avoid, but if I'm distracted, then I'm just going to get lost. So it's our ability to choose a direction and stay in that direction is very important. But that also takes training. Training in concentration. Just not about sitting down to meditate also. It's an important element, but it's a little bit like when someone went to Buddha and said, well, what is it that you and your disciples do, Buddha? And Buddha answered, we walk, we sit, we eat. And this person said, excuse me, Buddha, but we walk, sit, and eat. What's the difference? And he answered, the difference is that when we're walking, we are walking. When we sit, we're seated. And when we eat, we are eating. This ability to concentrate, being present in what we're doing. I've shown you these a couple times, these paintings that are here. There are these 4 paintings that are between the windows. If you look behind, in the middle of these main images, and then the smaller images in the middle. So between the windows, there are many different people. Between the small images, they're called the 84 Mahasiddhas. Maha means great, and Siddha means realized beings. And Lama Gangchen often referred to them. There were 84 people who lived mostly in India, because there's some of them who were not in India. And they were able to reach liberation, the enlightenment, with their training in Dharma. They adapted that to the lives that they led. One was a weaver, and so he adapted his own spiritual practice to his art of weaving. There was one who was a farmer, one who was a barmaid, one was a prostitute, one worked. Just there's all different forms of all different walks of life. And each one was able to adapt his own spiritual practice to the life that they led, independently of what we should do in our lifetime. If we are able to train and try to do what we need to do by being present when we're training in concentration, we do it to the best of our ability. If I need to answer an email or just watch the news, anything I need to do, I try to do it with presence. When I need to wash something, I need to do the laundry, do it with awareness. And with this, already we start training in the second higher training. Concentration. Unfortunately, to get to a level of concentration, I don't know, a higher level of translation, a higher level of concentration to be able to be able to reach a state where we can keep our mind focused on what we want it to focus on. One of the first things that is taught on how to develop concentration is one of the first things we need to do is eliminate distractions. Once you have reached a state of concentration, you can be surrounded by distractions, and one doesn't get distracted. But at the beginning, one needs to eliminate distractions. Here, you mean useless information. I say unfortunately at the beginning because we're living in times where we are actually bombarded continuously with useless information. And the problem is that this continuous stimulation of our senses creates addiction without getting into details. But every time we perceive something new, we have this dopamine arises in our body, and so we have like a physical addiction. Social media is a physical addiction. I'm not judging anybody's lifestyle. Those of you who know me better, I never say you should do more of this and less of this. But this aspect this aspect of our modern life is an enormous interference for our spiritual life, because it creates a level of addiction that keeps the mind from being relaxed. How often has it happened that you need to relax, you feel like you need to pick up your cell phone? And then someone is not able to just stay with himself. The classics I'm seeing, and it's happened to me too, and I try to protect myself from this, is we used to go to restaurants, a little bit less these days. So two people are at a table in a restaurant. One gets up to go to the bathroom. The one who stays there, the person has hardly gotten up, and the one who's staying seated takes his cell phone. Why? For nothing. The first time I realized this, I had gone to Spain. I took the metro to the center of town. I was by myself. It was 45 minutes of train, something like this. And I was fine. I was sitting there, and my instinct was just to pick up my cell phone. I didn't have internet. But anyway, it's as if I needed to do something. I didn't know exactly what, but at that time, luckily I realized what I was doing. With a great effort, I put my phone down. And I took my mind and I started reciting some mantra. And I saw how strong that addiction is. So if we want to develop concentration, one thing to do is to diminish this addiction to stimuli. And come into contact with only necessary, useful information. I want to watch the news. Do it with awareness. I want to watch a movie to relax. Okay, so it's normal to relax and watch a movie, but not something that, as a habit. And when one has this addiction to external stimuli, and if we want to develop ourselves, if we want to just stay in this kind of inertia, then just keep the habits you have. Just another aspect of this inertia and this addiction to stimuli. This brings us to be. This makes us much more fragile. So in the end, I'm going to close the parentheses. So just to conclude, the higher training of concentration, we shouldn't wait to be seated in meditation. First, we need to diminish our distractions and bring our attention to the very, very simple things that we do daily. I'm driving, I'm driving. I'm speaking, I'm speaking. I'm listening. I think in a relationship between two people, it helps a lot because how often has it happened when you're talking to someone and that person's not present anymore, or where you're listening to someone and you're not really present listening? It's not nice. When you're with someone, even if we don't have a lot of time, but if we're really present for the other person, you're giving a lot more than if you had given much more time. So the presence in what we're doing is very important. We can all train in this. This reminds me today to Lama Michel Rinpoche. He's the only person that I know who had this ability. He was even if it seemed like he wasn't paying attention, he was observing everything. But he had a characteristic where he was able to keep his attention. He was able to keep his attention on something even when he was sleeping. And it happened many times. He would go talk to other people for the center, or two people were talking about something important, and so they're talking, often in his room, where there's this really big bed, the way they do in the Tibetan culture. And he was there seated, speaking, and at a certain point he closed his eyes and he started actually even to snore. I mean, what do you do when you start talking to someone who then closes his eyes and starts resting and starts snoring? You stop talking, out of respect, huh? But the second the person would stop speaking, he would then, without even opening his eyes, he would say, no, keep talking. And but even if it seemed like he was sleeping, I just kept on talking. And then when the person would stop talking, maybe he would wake up. He had been sleeping, but he remembered every word that had been spoken, and he gave all of his advice and his answers. I've not had the opportunity to see other masters with this ability. Instead of me, if I'm sleeping deeply. But beyond this, be present in what you do. And we need to train in small things. The last point, which is called the third higher training in wisdom. Just training in wisdom, simply put, is training in coherence between appearance and reality, and what reality is. Let me explain myself better. Today we started talking about impermanence, and we said that something that generates suffering is the ignorance that something that creates suffering is the ignorance that grasps to that which is impermanent as being permanent. So our body or the person in front of us who, we know is impermanent but appears permanent. So a grasping of that appearance of permanence is a form of ignorance. So seeing that which is impermanent as being permanent is ignorance, and instead, training in wisdom is seeing things as they are. So you see things that are impermanent as being impermanent. You see that which is interdependent as being interdependent. Seeing that which is relative as being relative. Our tendency instead is seeing something that is relative as being absolute. Our tendency is to see that which is subjective as being objective. But those are forms of ignorance. Instead, wisdom as training is seeing reality as it is. Impermanent for impermanent, relative as relative. The great difficulty here is that ignorance is not conceptual. Only a very small part of ignorance is conceptual, but it's much deeper. The example that's given is the reflection of our face in the mirror. When we look into the mirror, I was about to say when we look at ourselves in the mirror, that's wrong. No, when we look in the mirror, what do we see in the mirror, really? Do we see ourselves, or do we see a reflection of our face? We see a reflection. I've said it many times. I just somewhere, I just find it absolutely mind-blowing that none of us have ever seen his own face. Maybe what we've seen is a reflection of our face in the mirror or a representation of our face in a photograph. But our own face, I've never seen it. I've never seen my own face. Not me, not you. So when we look into a mirror, if we analyze, what are we seeing? We see a reflection. The reflection of our face is the light that comes from our face that reflects onto the mirror. What would happen if all the mirrors that we used in the past were curved? We would have a perception of our face. We would be fatter or thinner, depending on the kind of mirror that we were using. But what if every mirror that we used had a kind of yellow filter? So then we would think that our face was more yellow, etc. So what's important here is that when we conceptually understand, and you don't need a degree in philosophy, but when we see that what we see in the mirror is not actually our face, and we're all convinced, right? We know that we see only when we see a reflection of our face in the mirror, but it's not actually our face in the mirror. We agree on that, right? But if we were to close our eyes and then we open our eyes, look into the mirror spontaneously, what do we see? Our face. Because it appears as if it were our face, but it isn't. Ignorance is grasping at that appearance as if it were true. Wisdom is seeing the appearance of the face in the mirror and knows that it's a mere reflection. It's a representation of our face, but not our actual face. In the same way, the world around us is perceived by us. Every single thing that we perceive, every person, every situation, every object no matter what it is perceived through this filter of these 5 things, these 5 characteristics that I talked about before. None of us is able to perceive anything independently of our own genetics, predispositions, education, experiences, or senses of our body. We live our reality through these filters. So when I see you, without analyzing, I see you. But analyzing, I'm not seeing you, I am seeing my version of you. Which is different from from the other person. It's different from what you see and different from what another person sees. So even if what I see is not you, that is my version, it appears to me as being you. And this is ignorance. Wisdom is gradually understanding that what I see is my version of you. And each one of us sees his own. And it's the same for all of us and all things. But just in a few words to conclude, in life we have these choices. Or we transform with awareness or without awareness. So transform without awareness is what we always do. We stay in this kind of inertia of the habits that we created. Transforming with awareness requires effort, requires courage to get out of this comfort zone. There's courage to swim against the current. Not of the world, but just the current of our own habits. Sometimes it feels like we're going against the art of society and the world, but it's mostly because our negative habits are often very similar to what a society accepts. So what happens is we really need to take the reins of our life in our own hands and ask ourselves, who do I want to be when I get old? Once a friend, a Brazilian actress, said to me, that really touched me, when I met Lama Michel, I have become who I wanted to be as when I was old, when I got big, I was rich and successful in my career, and he taught me to live who I want to be at the time of my death, to live who I want to be inside, what inner qualities do I want to develop, who do I want to become. It's never too late, but it's never too early, so better to get started. So I invite you all to reflect on the idea that life is a constant transformation, and the direction that we transform can be just inertia or a wrong direction. Lama Michel, he would, kind of joking, he would say, those who are quiet need TikTok, those who talk too much need to be quiet, those who move around a lot need to stay still, and those who stay still need to travel, need to get out of this comfort zone and act virtuously. And to do this, we need to remember, and that's why we have these images, objects, all of this objects that we have, images and malas and different colors and different types of clothing. All of this is to help us remember the line, the path we want to follow. So these are not objects and images to venerate or to idolize. These are images, the representations of where we want to go, and they're our guidelines that show us where we want to go. So let's just remember, to conclude, the understanding is good, but we need to put into practice daily what is in our abilities. There's no expectation that from one day to the next one becomes a great meditator. But we all need to put into practice what we can. So to be present when you're eating, that you're eating. There's no one who can't put effort into not saying what's not necessary, or put effort into having more gratitude. Just small effort in daily life. So now it's time for dedications.